Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us again this week on our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with Kyle Nabors and Sean Hammond. We join you every week. I'd say about this time, but we have no idea when you're listening to the podcast. You can join us if you'd like. If you haven't done that yet, though, we do this actually live via StreamYard. You can go to any one of our Twitter accounts. You'll see our Twitter handles up there at various points during this podcast. We'll get them out there for you as well. Or you can, certainly go through YouTube and you can actually participate, send in questions. I know we've already got some questioners lined up this week, and we're going to get to you guys in just a few minutes. The Chicago Bears guys, of course, 0-1. I don't know if it's really worth rehashing whether it's a good 0-1 or a bad 0-1 or where they're at. But they certainly used their opening game in Los Angeles to raise a lot of new questions. Maybe not new questions, but to put the spotlight on questions, Sean. And all week long, it's been kind of, listen, it's week one. Mathematically, there is no such thing as a must-win game. You kind of hate when, people based on their opinions start calling them must-wins because how they think teams are going to react. The Bengals are not a must-win game Sunday, but off what happened in Los Angeles Sunday, this is certainly a franchise that needs something, a roster that needs something for themselves. But they better go out and play a pretty good football game on Sunday because they did not acquit themselves well in Los Angeles.
They did not, and the defensive breakdowns were really, really bad. And anybody who thought that Eddie Jackson and Tashawn Gibson would have a bad game, that was probably worse than they were expecting. I mean, that was surprising, especially when you're talking, we talked all off season about how they have a defensive coordinator whose focus has been the secondary, and it just didn't really look good against Matthew Stafford and the Rams on Sunday.
Kyle, what's interesting about this to me coming out of last Sunday night, there was probably a column idea in this, although it's too late now because I hadn't really thought about it. But of all the things that were upsetting Sunday night, the defense, obviously, just the missed assignments, and as Tayshaun Gibson called them, the brain farts were just too much. I thought the coaching was as responsible in many respects as the defensive miscues for the loss. Obviously, they only put 14 points on the board, but ironically, we're looking at the offense and the players themselves. I'm not hearing a lot of complaints with what anybody did. The interception that Dalton throws is deflected. The fumble is a strip sack that there's just no way he can really feel coming. Other than that, they create a lot of third downs. I should say convert a lot of third downs. David Montgomery was maybe the best back in the league week one. Receivers weren't really used, so you can't criticize them. The offensive line wasn't the reason they lost, even though we'll talk about what was exposed at left tackle. It feels right now like the onus going into week two is the opposite of what we might have expected. It's really on the defense and on Matt Nagy.
Well, I mean, I think that's an accurate statement because, the game plan was, or what Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace told us, with starting Andy Dalton, was he needs to be a game manager and that the defense is good enough for us to win games. That isn't the case, though. I mean, Andy Dalton isn't going to be able to go out and put up 30 points week in and week out. And if the defense isn't going to give you a better effort than we got on Sunday, it's going to be hard to win games with that combination.
Well, and Kyle, just to follow up on that, there's one specific point for me, is that not only where the mistakes were made, but this is where I come back to where the coaching troubled me so much. Andy Dalton did a decent job of managing the game Sunday night. The game plan, the script that they gave him to get to 4th and 15 with 10 minutes to play and know that you've thrown the ball more than 11 yards downfield only once, making all of those speed receivers operate in that 10, 12-yard box around the line of scrimmage to try and get the ball out so fast, playing right into Jalen Ramsey, who was one of the best defensive players in football's hands. It's ironic. Aaron Donald is the best player in football, a defensive player. They handled him, and yet Jalen Ramsey, who's another one, kind of dominated the game at times. The game plan, to me, I thought was just awful.
Yeah, I mean the first or the fourth down calls where Jalen Ramsey was able to break up passes. I think you and I, the 4th and 15 is interesting to me. He's taken a lot of heat over that, and rightfully so, because you had given no indication that you could move the ball downfield. You put yourself in a 4th and 15. The thing there is, I understand his reasoning. The chances of even kicking the field goal there with the way your defense is played, of getting 2 stops in a quick enough manner to go down and then put up an additional 10 points, it's really slim. But their offense had given them no reason to believe that they were going to be able to convert a 4th and 15 at the same time.
Yeah, and for all of our listeners, I hope you enjoyed Molly's 1 gallon water drink there. That's one of the joys of doing this the way we do. Hey, she's a 60-pound dog. She gets thirsty once in a while. It was just nuts all night long trying to figure out what they were doing at times on both sides of the football. And Sean, let's come back to the one area of offense that did stick out for the wrong reasons, but not because guys necessarily played bad. You know how thin you are at left tackle going in. You worry about, pulling Jason Peters away from the creek somewhere down in Texas and having him start an NFL game 3 weeks later. You've got Larry Borum, who's really never played the position for the most part, has to step in for Peters. You don't have Tevin Jenkins available. They have prioritized the left tackle position exactly the way we all wanted them to throughout the offseason, and they can't get anything to work.
Yeah, I mean, you can't control the injuries; those are unfortunate. But they've kind of put themselves in this position with the guys that they've brought in, and you never want to get down to your third left tackle, and it's unfortunate. But the Bears were fairly happy with how Elijah Wilkinson played given the circumstances, and it seems to me like the Jason Peters injury isn't anything major. When it happened, he actually stayed in for a snap and came out a play or two after he initially hurt it's a quad injury. I suspect he might be back this week. He's been back at practice in a limited capacity, but losing Larry Borum certainly is going to hurt. Whether you have Jason Peters or not, that's going to hurt your depth, and we'll have to see just how bad his ankle injury is.
We have a question in here from Rick about Jason Peters that I'll throw up on the screen really quickly. But before I do that, I kind of want to get your guys' evaluation of what you felt or how you felt Jason Peters played on Sunday when he was in the game. I personally thought it was a bit of a shaky start, and he was starting to settle in when the injury occurred.
Sean, why don't you grab that first?
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I think he, as the game went on, he acquitted himself well, and maybe he's not, your Pro Bowl All-Star left tackle at this point in his career, but he certainly was handling the situations well enough from what you want to see.
Hey, have you guys heard the radio spot where the guy said, "And now you all know I live with my mom," or 82% of you know I live with my mom? I'm just trying to handle the Keurig machine and the dog drinking and everything. That's what makes these podcasts, I think, so natural. I thought you described it exactly, Kyle. He clearly, was out of whack a little bit at the beginning. He missed a couple times early, looked slow getting out of his stance, but he did appear to be moving a little better, getting a little more rhythm. And then he had that outstanding blitz pickup that everybody saw. As usual, people focus on the wrong thing. He wiped that poor kid out, but you got to remember that poor kid gave up 160 pounds to him. So all he's really got to do is put his hands on him and wipe him out. But the fact that he did it. And then Kyle, you made such a great point. I don't remember if we were talking Sunday or Monday, but you told me to go take a look at the play that Ryan Fitzpatrick got hurt on. So if you want to wail and moan about where the Bears are at left tackle right now, look at what Charles Leno is still doing in Washington, and it will remind you they've done what they had to do here. And at least this is the one area where, Kyle, the product is luck. It's happenstance. It's circumstance. Maybe Tevin Jenkins back was an issue and they should have known. But as we did our pre-draft work, I found one team that had a red flag on them. It wasn't something that anybody else had earmarked. They didn't have the advantage of the combine. So there's all kinds of reasons that can happen. But even if you want to criticize them for that, to also have gotten Borum and appear to have a discovery here, to have gone out and gotten Peters when you had to. Elijah Wilkinson, I don't think you can live with him at left tackle, but he didn't cost them the game when he had to come in and play. So, I think they've added bodies and tried to upgrade, but they just can't seem to get it to work out for them.
Yeah, I agree. And this kind of brings us to Rick's question. So I'm going to throw that up on the screen, Hub, and let you take it away because I think you can answer it better than I can.
Well, and Rick is a regular with us at Twitter, at the website, and here on the podcast. Thanks a lot for joining us again this week, Rick. If Jason Peters cannot go the whole game Sunday, do you think Alex Bars should get a chance instead of Wilkinson? Rick, I have been wanting Alex Bars to get a chance at left tackle for the entire 2+ seasons that he's been here. I felt that at Notre Dame, he was a day 2 draft prospect, either as a guard or a left tackle. He was playing guard at Notre Dame when he tore the ACL, the 5th game of his senior year, which is why he ended up not getting drafted at all. But he had played some tackle before. He has the prototypical left tackle body. He appears to have some really good athleticism. But I have talked to some people who've watched him who've told me, while he is athletic, his foot quickness, just that part of it, his feet may not be quite as quick as you'd like, but it certainly is something worth looking at. Now, the flip side of that is that he is second string at left guard, center, and right guard. He's really good on the interior. He's now shown he can play all those positions. And so you do have to protect that depth as well when you've got all these other tackles on the roster. Sean, he's a great kid. He's a quiet kid. He just comes to work. He works his butt off. And I do think he might be able to play out there. But at this stage, going into week 2, I don't know if you mess with that before you try and work with the tackles that you've got. Again, I don't think you can live with Elijah Wilkinson as your starter. I don't think you want him out there in crunch time. But he's not the worst. You know what? He's similar to Charles Leno, I guess is the best way to answer that question. So, if you're looking for an upgrade over Leno, then yeah, I would go for Bars. If you can live with a Leno type player as your 2 or your 3, then you probably stay with Elijah Wilkinson.
Yeah, I'm with you on your point about the personnel. If Alex Bars is coming in to be your backup left tackle, then why is Elijah Wilkinson here? I mean, that's why you brought him here. These are the situations where you wanted a guy with tackle experience, and while Alex Bars might be able to do it, he's got a lot on his plate in some other positions, and we may wind up seeing him, if one of these guys on the interior goes down.
Kyle, you look at the Bengals coming in here Sunday, and it's probably time to start looking forward. I think that, to relive the missed assignments and the blunders. I guess there's one question before we move on to Sunday, though, which is how do we react to young, inexperienced defensive coordinator Sean Desai facing this kind of adversity right out of the box? Is it because he's young and inexperienced, and he's going to have a whole different approach and game plan to his second game? I don't think so. I don't think that was the issue. That's why Mike Pettin is here. And you talk about a grizzled veteran. I don't think it's because they lost anything in experience. I just don't know if after a year away from the game and after 2 years away from playing in front of fans for the most part, did they think they were prepared but just weren't prepared? Now, that is the coach's responsibility to identify that. But they looked to me, Alec Ogletree said it. I was surprised, and it's interesting because he was the only guy on the defense new to it. He said he didn't feel like the energy was out there, like they didn't play with the right energy. I asked Matt Nagy about it, and Matt had a good answer. He said, well, sometimes that energy comes from making plays on the field. And when you give up the big explosive on the third play of the game or whatever it was, you're always fighting from behind, then you do it again. Now, that's your fault. So to the point, they still may not have been at that mental peak. But whatever it is, how do we expect this defense, and in particular Sean Desai, to react this Sunday?
Well, I mean, Alec Ogletree said it. There was another player I can't remember offhand that also talked about not playing enough with enough juice, I believe was the term I remember reading, and that's concerning to me because you're talking. This is week 1 Sunday night, and you come out flat. I mean that's unacceptable. That I didn't like that. I didn't like hearing that. On Monday's a post-mortem press conference with Matt Nagy, him talking about the safeties need to be more aggressive when touching down a player. These are NFL veteran players. These are mistakes that should not happen. Teams should not be coming out flat in week 1. So those things concern me. And I'm going to throw Rick has another question up here, and it ties into what we're talking about here. And he asked, what happens to the Bears what happened to the Bears defense? Do you think their age is showing? And I don't know if it's age or it's just general decline, because you should be concerned about Eddie Jackson and Tayshaun Gibson, but equally concerning to me was the lack of a pass rush on Sunday. While I've seen a lot of people already harping on Robert Quinn. I actually thought Robert Quinn probably played better on Sunday night than he did at any point last year. But they got absolutely nothing from Khalil Mack. If they can't generate a pass rush, they're gonna have a hard time stopping people.
Yeah, and this is what often makes the conversation around the team so frustrating because, and this is a product of talk radio and social media and all kinds of other things. All of a sudden, fans, sometimes fanatic fans, sometimes even just casual fans become experts without looking at tape. Robert Quinn played a pretty good game. He wasn't great. He wasn't a Pro Bowler. That sack was his, that they gave half of it to Akeem Hicks. Akeem got there to help clean up, but it was Quinn who got there. And, Quinn wasn't awful. He wasn't certainly the problem with the defense. But actually, Sean, I wrote this. I lose track of the days, guys. Forgive me. It's not just because I'm old. It's because we're going every day and trying to provide a lot of coverage. But I know in specific answer to Kyle's question, my take is that there could be a third option. It may be not that they've gotten old, or not that they're just not good enough. It may be going back to what we were talking about before and how ready they were to play last Sunday. I thought Brad Biggs had a piece in the Tribune. And I referenced it in my column, and I know we, of course, gave Biggsy credit for it. It's not that I didn't know, but I just wasn't really thinking about it. It's great analysis by him. This is the same defense that, to a man, with the exception of Roquan Smith, chose to pass on every voluntary workout this summer. They were not at any of the OTAs. They were not at the voluntary minicamp, or rather the team workout. Well, we don't know what they did with the team workout program, but they participated in none of the on-field work. And so we get back to a lot of questions. This is happening around the NFL. It wasn't just here in Chicago. A lot of players were, protesting the 17th game, or they're unhappy with the CBA that they agreed to, which is shame on them since they're the ones who voted for it. But when they don't show up to possibly practice and get better, and then they don't show up and play at their peaks on Sunday, I think it's probably in their heads as much as anything else. I think these guys may just need a kick in the butt.
Yeah, and a game like this might be exactly the thing, to do that when you come out week one and get punched in the mouth. I mean, I certainly would expect to see a better effort from the Bears defense next week, and not just because they're playing a more beatable opponent, but I think when something like that happens, they're going to respond, and I think Sean Desai is, he seems like he's pretty clear-headed, and he's going to take every week the same. He's going to be approaching things the same whether you win or lose, and I think that's going to, in the long run, that's going to work in the Bears' favor defensively.
We got another question here, and I think it kind of ties in because there is another option, and I don't think that this is the actual issue yet, but it can become an issue quickly because Gary says, is there turmoil inside Hallis already? And like I said, I don't think that's the case, but if you have a defense that isn't getting up, right, you start to wonder, is there a disconnect between the players and the coaching staff? And like I said, I don't think that's the case yet. But if we get 3 or 4 weeks in and that continues to be kind of a lackluster malaise from the defense, then you start to wonder if there is a disconnect.
Gary, we can give you our best read on it. Sean and I are there every day that people are allowed to be there. And again, this is the kind of stuff that, Gary, I understand why you asked the question. I'm not criticizing you for asking the question. But again, this is where we get to some of the social media stuff and the talking heads and talk radio. There was a report at the beginning of the week by one of what I call these citizen journalists. They claim to be Bears media. They have destinations and locations, but they've never been within 40 miles of Hallis Hall, or been to a game, or been in a locker room that any of us have seen. And this particular report was, a source is telling me that he is being told that there's already grumbling in the locker room about Justin Fields. Well, number one, I find that impossible to believe because I am there every day. But number two, when somebody with no real credentials is reporting what an anonymous source told an anonymous source who told it to him, that's where this garbage comes from. And
I saw the tweet you're referring to.
Yeah, I don't even want to give the guy credit. I don't even want to mention it. And stuff. It is what it is. It's the world we live in. Some people enjoy it. I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy it. I'm just saying be careful how much stock you put in it. Sean, these guys really, for all appearances, 101% seem to still be in lockstep with each other, comfortable with their team and who they are, certainly not grumbling about coaches. There was another one where I will get specific. It was with Marquise Goodwin, and it was I can't remember if it was Monday or Tuesday. I guess were you there, Sean, with the Marquise Goodwin interview?
I was not, no.
Okay, yeah, so it was Monday. And Marquise comes out and he's trying to be a good guy. And we're trying to ask him, about, well, the game plan stunk last night. What can you tell us about it? And this kid bent over backwards, not to say anything critical in any way of the coaching staff or the play calling. I mean, he kept, and you knew what he was doing. He kept giving the stock answer. Hey, that's the coach's job. I don't get into that. I just got to run the plays, that they give me and blah, blah, blah. So we move away from that line of questioning. And then we come back to talking about Jalen Ramsey. And I actually asked the question, I talked about with a player like Jalen Ramsey out there moving all over, how much does it limit, your ability to make plays, particularly when you're keeping everything in the first 10, 12 yards. And he said, well, certainly it would be easier against Jalen Ramsey if we had some deeper options. And next thing you know, apparently 2 or 3 guys wrote, stories that Marquise Goodwin was criticizing the game plan and the coaches. And I guess you can say in that particular regard and how they handle Ramsey that he wasn't happy with what they did. But he went out of his way to say, no, I'm not, we're with these coaches. So again, Gary, I just can't imagine yet. I mean, it happens and it could happen here. You don't know. There are a few guys up there that have us puzzled as to the way they're acting. Akeem Hicks is one who we can get into a little bit if you guys want. But that there's any kind of, dissension or grumbling or problems in the locker room or concerns about this coaching staff, not week 2, Sean. At least I haven't seen it.
No, there's no panic at this point, and it's too early, I think, for that. And there might be, some people who have their opinions behind closed doors, but I really don't think that's going to be an issue, unless we get 5-6 weeks into the season and you're looking at a 2-4 record or something like that. Then maybe that might be the case, but I don't think there's any panic at Hall right now from these guys.
So we're talking as we get into offense here. Gary had a follow-up question, and talking about the verticality and everything. And this is going to be a question that we're going to get more and more as the season goes on. So we might as well dive in here. And Gary asked his follow-up was, how much field do we see this weekend?
Gary, the bar has been set at 5 plays. So it's probably going to be a fun prop bet for people. Take the over/under. Could be 6 or 7, could be 3 or 4. I don't think they're certainly. Sean, Matt was asked the question yesterday. With using Justin Fields this way, are you doing it strategically as part of the game plan to try and fool the other team, or are you doing it to develop him so that he's ready to take over the starting job? Well, the obvious answer is both. And Matt said, but not to not answer the question, right now it's more strategic. There's special plays that they've put in. I know that the Dalton Bears haters, who all they think matters get Fields on the field as quick as possible, want to believe that everything has to be done to accelerate that process. That is, no matter how much we try and report what's happening to you guys, if you want to ignore it, you can. They are doing what they can to win football games, and they believe at this point that the best way to win games is with a veteran game manager with the offense they've put together until Justin Fields is ready to be that far better athlete, arm talent game manager. And so my guess is you'll see 5, 6, 7 plays. Sean, I don't know if you agree.
The one interesting note, I think, is that, if we're to believe what Matt Nagy says, which I generally do, but sometimes not, but he said that the flow of that game, the fact that they were down a couple of touchdowns in that second half, really limited their opportunities to use Fields in those very specific situations where they want to take advantage of his ability, his athletic ability. I think if it's a closer game this week against the Bengals, if they're in this, we might see him a handful of snaps more than 5, but certainly I wouldn't expect to see him a lot.
Well, and Kyle, there is a flip side to this. And again, this is, I know when I wrote this column, it was Thursday, and it's up at shawlocal.com. And by the way, guys, whether you read me or not is irrelevant, but it's very important to me that you go to shawlocal.com as much as possible. So that's why I keep reminding you where all this coverage is. And, we do work on it. We'd love to have you read it. So this is yesterday's column. It's up there right now. The other thing you got to remember is that this is Andy Dalton playing the Bengals, and one of the reasons that I don't think there's any panic, any turmoil, anybody just they do seem to like playing for Nagy. They do listen to him. He communicates well. And what better way to piss off a bunch of your guys than to take a guy who's got his old team out there, who he wants to, you just know he wants to throw for 500 yards against him. Now, it's not going to happen, obviously. And so you're going to take him off the field, at the expense of giving him that opportunity to develop the rookie. If ever there was a game where I would think it's in their best interest to focus the game plan around Andy Dalton, if he's your starter, if he's not your starter, then do whatever you want and get the kid on the field. But they've told us, Kyle, he's the starter. So I think that this game plan is all about giving Andy Dalton the best chance to beat the Bengals.
Yeah, your column that you wrote yesterday, you mentioned specifically the quick hook that Mitch Trubisky got last year against Atlanta. And that is a possible scenario if Andy Dalton goes out and lays an egg this week, that you could see that change made. But I don't think Andy Dalton is going to do that. I'm probably the most critical of the guy out of the three of us, and he's not that bad. You know what I mean? The thing is, he's a game manager, and he is not going to get vertical. He didn't do it at all last year in Dallas. The more likely scenario for when we see Justin Fields consistently is when they make the determination, if they make the determination that they can't get enough offense with Andy compared to what their defense is giving up. I think that's what's going to ultimately is going to cause a change when it happens. Now, going back, I do find it interesting, just because we've mentioned it before, that Matt Nagy specifically said that they had gotten to the point with Justin Fields that they were, the next step for him was learning post-snap reads at full speed in NFL games. So I do think it's got to be hard for an offense to balance that. You want to get him the experience. You're trying to say you're being strategic about it. I don't know how you can do that and really stay on an even keel, if you know what I mean.
Well, Kyle, I think strategically what he means is you put in a play that's designed for his athleticism and his arm talent in that moment, as opposed to finding situations to teach him, like you just talked about, and worry about the post-snap reads. That I think that's what they're doing now. Guys, the other piece of this is that it's a hard conversation for a lot of us, and because again, I go back, Andy Dalton, as we were writing about this and analyzing and predicting in February and March and April. I mean, Kyle, how many times did I write, get me anybody but Andy Dalton? It's not because it's not against him. It's the kind of player he is. Thought if the offense was going to take off, you couldn't get another. There's nothing Andy Dalton can do that Mitch Trubisky couldn't do, I guess is my problem. And so once it became obvious to me that Mitch wasn't coming back, the guy I really wanted was Tyrod Taylor. It's not about being right or wrong. We don't know who's right or wrong. First of all, there's only been one game. But I got no dog in this race. I guess that's all I'm trying to say. But what I do think is important as an analyst and for fans to understand is there's a lot more that goes into this process than just the plays they're making on the field. You need someone to mentor and help you teach this young man. You need someone to lead the offense and lead the locker room and lead this team while they know they're in the process of being replaced. You need a special kind of guy to do that. And Sean, I can't say enough about the class with which Andy Dalton has handled this. I'm not wild about what I see on the field, but that's an important part of the process too. And so I think he's at least entitled to his moment. And if ever there was going to be one with the Bengals coming to town, this should be his moment.
Yeah, he's handled everything well, and he's said the right things, and he's not, he's been quiet when avoiding saying what he shouldn't. Kyle, can I throw up this question here from Hairless Yoda, because I think this goes right into what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna go there next.
I want to get Hub's take on this. Go ahead, Hub.
I don't care what the question is. I just like Hairless Yoda. It's great avatar. So Yoda wants to know if on Sunday the offensive scheme is still limited in terms of downfield explosive play production. Who's to blame? Matt Nagy's to blame. And Matt Nagy was to blame last Sunday night. Now, the difference is it was easy to see why he did what he did last Sunday night. When you're trying to handle both Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, the last thing you want is to give them extra time to make plays. I thought that the scheme that they ran was very good for handling Aaron Donald. It obviously wasn't very good for handling Jalen Ramsey. The Bengals I'm not saying the Bengals are bad. They've got some nice players, but they don't offer anybody that causes you to build a game plan around them on their defense. And so we need to see, I guess, Yoda, the answer to the question is we need to see Matt Nagy's offense Sunday wide open. There shouldn't be anything in that playbook that shouldn't be available to him. And Sean, this will give us a lot better handle on where Andy Dalton's. Forget Justin Fields for a minute. If Dalton's going to play, can they win with him? I don't think that Sunday was much of a measurement against the Rams because the Rams were really good, because the Rams were big favorites, because they didn't open up the playbook. This Sunday, they have to. They've got the home field excitement. And so I think we're going to see everything that's in that playbook, and they're going to give Dalton a chance to succeed.
Yeah, I'm with you, Hub. If the offense against the Bengals looks like it did against the Rams, that's going to be a serious problem. I wouldn't necessarily expect that. The Rams have a very unique guy in Aaron Donald and a unique guy in Jalen Ramsey too. They had to do certain things to try to avoid Aaron Donald in the middle. I think they're gonna open it up a little bit more, and I think this is a defense, the Bengals defense, that they can do that against, and I think they'll be able to have some success. And I certainly think David Montgomery can have some success running the ball too.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. If the Bears are smart, they're going to pound the ball with David Montgomery this week. The Bengals defense has been bad the last few years against the run. While Dalvin Cook didn't absolutely destroy them, he still was very good this past Sunday. David Montgomery, 3 carries in the first quarter against the Rams was completely unacceptable. They have to have a more balanced offense. I think you're going to see that this week. But my question to you guys here is, if we do see another kind of mediocre vanilla offense and the Bears lose in week 2 to the Bengals, do we see Justin Fields start in week 3?
I don't think so, Kyle. To do that kind of 180 degree, and again, this gets back to a lot of things. Okay. You have to measure your locker room. You have to have a sense of how your guys are going to react, and you don't have to have unanimous buy-in, but you better have a pretty strong consensus. And everybody likes the kid. He's a great kid. I mean, one of the things that nobody realizes about Justin Fields, because all fans want to do is see him on the football field, is that he is a really impressive young man and has fit in very well. They have no issues there. But, as we've said, this is a middle-aged veteran team, and Sean, I think that a lot of those 30-somethings want to see Andy Dalton treated the same way they want to be treated. And really, again, a lot of folks thought the Rams game was unwinnable. You do have to do something if they're just as bad against the Bengals, but it's still only 2 games. Clearly, it's not this isn't just Mike Glennon saying this is my year 17 times in the same interview. This is Matt Nagy confirming more times than Andy Dalton has said it, that we believe that for this year, Andy Dalton should be the starter. And we all know he's going to have to eat those words somewhere, whether it's week 6 or week 8 or week 14, but to do it week 3, then you just come across as a real phony. And I don't think he can do that.
I think it would have to be really bad against the Bengals for that to be the case. I don't see Justin Fields starting in week 3 either, unless it was just a terrible performance from Dalton. If it's another vanilla, like you said, Kyle, if it's a vanilla mediocre performance, I don't think that's enough to make a change. I mean, I don't
think it's enough to make a change if they win. If they lose, I think there's 2 scenarios. Either you're not scoring enough with Andy Dalton, or your defense isn't good enough for Andy Dalton to carry them. You know what I mean?
And not that it shouldn't be enough to change, but I just don't think that that's where Matt Nagy and the Bears are at right now.
Right. You got to remember one other thing about this too, guys, is that when that happened last year, it wasn't just that Mitch threw that awful interception, because week 3 was too soon. It wasn't fair. If there was an alleged competition, he won it. To get the hook when he did wasn't fair, but there was something else that happened. He made that awful throw, and you were down to the Atlanta freaking Falcons, by 3 touchdowns, and there was a quarter and a half on the clock, and so you say we got to stop the bleeding. Nick Foles comes in. There's a miracle comeback. If Nick Foles comes in and just plays well, but they only lose by 1 touchdown or 2 touchdowns instead of 3, I think Mitch Trubisky probably is the starter again week 3. What happened is what Foles did was so over the top that how could you go back to Mitch? Foles had come in and absolutely just grabbed it. Now, if Dalton is bad enough that they put Fields in during a game and he has a similar performance, then then you can suddenly make the argument the following week that it's time. But I don't think just from his 5 or 6 plays a game and studying the game tape after 2 weeks that you're going to come back and say, well, we were wrong. Now Justin gives us a better chance to win.
You gotta admit a mistake at some point.
Yeah, again, you asked what we think. I'm not saying what's right or wrong.
I know. I agree. I do think that that's where the Bears are at. I agree with you. I think it's wrong.
Well, and so there's the problem. It's not the problem, Kyle. There's the fun. I couldn't disagree more strongly. I mean, the idea with where this team is at and what they had hoped to accomplish and all that was at stake this year, the idea that their best chance was to start a rookie on day one who's never played against an NFL defense. I don't buy that. And so, the idea that that becomes different on week 2 or even week 3, I don't buy that either. At some point, once you're out of it, once you're not going to contend, then absolutely put the kid out there and stop playing games. But they are still fighting desperately to try and avoid that, Sean.
Yeah, they certainly don't seem like they want to start Justin Fields anytime soon. And, they're getting him out there for 5 plays. And while that's great, I don't know, what really that's accomplishing from a development standpoint. Other than, you could argue that those preseason games were more valuable than 4 or 5 snaps.
Kyle, there's one other piece of this too that we always, I don't want to say we all forget, but I don't hear a whole lot about it. Both Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace, so we've only talked to Ryan Pace twice since he was drafted, but both of them have at one point said to us, very bluntly and matter-of-factly, hey, nobody wants to see Fields play more than we do. He's their guy. You saw the commitment they made to him. And so obviously they believe, professionally, based on the history of the game and the history of the position, that they're doing the right thing. And that's why they're doing it. It's not as if they don't want to play Fields. I think they'd love to play Fields, but I think their fear is if they play Fields and he makes enough rookie mistakes that suddenly the team is 1-6 and they could get fired in the middle of the year.
Yeah, that's one scenario, and that's there's so many reasons that we could come up with. I guess that's one very legitimate thought process. The other is that I've thought of is they signed Andy Dalton with no idea that Justin Fields was going to go to him. Andy Dalton is a well-liked veteran, a guy that already is liked in the locker room. So if you don't give him a fair shake, I do think that can cause a bit of tension in the locker room. I mean, you've seen that over the years where guys that, veteran guys come in or veteran guys lose a job that they shouldn't have lost. And it can cause the locker room to come unglued.
So, and here's the other question, guys. You got to remember, to Kyle's point, yes, they signed Andy Dalton before they drafted Justin Fields. But they also knew when they signed Andy Dalton that they were going to do everything they could to get one of these quarterbacks. I think they proved that, with the way they handled everything and the way they moved, and yet still clearly designated Dalton well ahead of the draft. So they knew they were going to try and get Justin Fields. We've now found out about all the homework they were doing and all the special visits. And if not Fields, one of the other guys. But they still said Dalton's going to be the guy. So this was always the plan, I guess is all I'm saying. It's not a Justin Fields plan. It's a rookie quarterback plan. And what I would ask you, Kyle, is that if it was anybody but Justin Fields, if they had gotten, and obviously forget Trevor Lawrence, but if they had drafted Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, or Trey Lance, would you be in the same hurry to start him as Justin Fields?
Probably not. No, particularly Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. I do think Trey Lance has the upside to be able to help a team right away. You're running a risk by throwing a rookie out there that it's not completely developed. But I don't think, I don't necessarily think that, says you can't win games with him.
I absolutely don't feel that you can't win games with him. Completely agree with you on that. But their job is to give themselves the best chance to win games. I think that's what we're focused on here, guys. We're getting near the end, and I have been terribly neglecting not mentioning our great sponsor, Heinz Lumber Company. Since 1892, all of your building needs around Chicago. They now have 11 great locations, and they are good enough to sponsor our podcast every week. We do appreciate that very much. Also want to remind you guys, we hope you enjoy visiting with us each week. You can, if you are with us right now, join us live and participate. You know that. If not, if you prefer just to listen at your leisure, be sure and go to shawlocal.com or the App Store on your phone or iTunes. You can download a subscription to our podcast, so it will be delivered to you automatically each week. And we look forward to being with you. As a matter of fact, there's even some talk about maybe doing it a couple times a week if, in fact, there's another sponsor out there. So, got some money? Give me a call. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding, actually. But,
not kidding.
Yeah. We are really flattered, guys, with the numbers in which you are joining us these days. And it seems to be growing extremely rapidly. So tell your friends, and we look forward to visiting. And again, I want to just stress one more time, it is very easy just by going to one of our Twitter accounts. I am at Hub_Arkush. Sean, you have an underscore, don't you?
Correct, yes.
At Sean_Hammond. And I believe, do we all have them? Kyle, you don't, do you?
I do not. I am just straight at Kyle Nabors.
Right. Yeah, now I will remember. Go to any one of our Twitter accounts and you can join this podcast live. We do give you a day's warning or so as to the start time. Now, we're usually off the start by about 4, 5, 6 minutes with the technical part of it. And we're probably going to be settling in around 9:30 on Friday mornings, we think. We'd love to have you guys join us and participate. We'll take your questions, do the best we can to answer them. So, guys, with about 5 minutes left, I think we can squeeze in 5 more. What about Sunday? What do we see? What do we really think happens here? Kyle, I know that you are the most concerned of the three of us about that quarterback position. I love these situations where a guy like Dalton gets his old team, and they come to his new house. And it's going to be fascinating, guys. Are they going to be chanting Justin Fields' name when Dalton is introduced? Are they going to be chanting Justin Fields when he takes the field for the first play of the game? Is he going to get a chance? And then what's he going to do against his? Obviously, he can't beat him by himself. But I think that's a kind of a drama inside the drama that I'm really looking forward to.
I don't think they chant Justin Fields' name when Andy Dalton is introduced. I do think the Boo Birds will come out early if the Bears offense struggles, and I think you will get a ridiculously loud cheer the first time Justin Fields comes out onto the field.
Sean, I think Kyle just made a better point. They won't chant Justin Fields' name, but I think Andy Dalton will be booed in the introductions, which I think is kind of shameful because he's.
You think they'll really? You think they'll boo him? Wow. I think there will be a smattering, but I think it'll be drowned out. I mean, that's going to be. That'd be really awkward if he's like roundly booed.
Well, that's what I'm worried about is really awkward, and that's not what I'm predicting. I'm not saying that there's going to be this raucous boo that goes through the stadium, but the Boo Birds will be there. And, Sean, it's interesting. People don't realize they talked about, well, you got to play in front of stands during the exhibition season. The stadium was never more than half full during the exhibition season. This is going to be a full house, and we're going to find out what Bears. And by the way, these are also, I don't want to say the fans in the exhibition games aren't real fans. They're great fans because they go to those lousy games. But more often than not, they're not the regulars, the usuals. And this will be a better way to take the temperature of where Bears Nation is at. But there's no doubt in my mind there will be some boos when he is introduced. And once we get past that, the better story, the more relevant story is as Rick was asking or Gary was asking, I forget which, is Matt Nagy going to open up the playbook? Because I think if the Bengals spent the time we know they spent studying that Rams game, on the very first set of downs, I think one of those plays has to be a double move and try and get Marquise Goodwin over the top. I don't care if it works or not, but that's why these guys are here, and if they don't soften up that defense early, they're playing right into the Bengals' hands.
Yeah, you're not going to hit any deep balls if you don't take any shots. You got to at least throw a few in there and give yourself a chance. And I think that David Montgomery can have a really good game against the Bengals here. I look for the Bears to win this game in the trenches. I think even with the questions at tackle, I think the middle of that offensive line is good enough to give Montgomery some good holes here to work with. And I think if they ride him, they can give themselves a shot in this game. And, Joe Burrow, he looked pretty good in his return after the ACL injury, but, he was running for his life there a few times. I think they had 5 sacks on him. So if there's ever a chance for the Bears pass rush to wake up, I mean, this is a really good opportunity.
I'm going to flip over to the defense with Sean in a minute, Kyle, but the thought I was just having, actually, I think what I would do, and this is we like to second guess play callers, but we don't have to do it. One of the things that's going to be on Matt Nagy's mind is he does not want to go 3 and out on his first possession. And so what you do not want to do is end up behind the chains or getting nothing on first down. But nonetheless, based on where they're at coming out of Sunday night, I would love it if ideally for their first play of the game, they came out 3 wide, 1 running back, put Allen Robinson in the slot, Mooney on one side, Goodwin on the other side, play action, 7-step drop, double moves on both flanks from Goodwin and Mooney, and see if somebody can outrun somebody and air the ball down the field. Even if it doesn't work, even if you got to deal with 2nd and 10, I think it sets you up. I would expect, knowing what we've seen of Matt, the opposite. We're going to see one of these lateral swing passes that might gain a yard or two.
A little side swipe.
I love the
there.
optimism there.
I see there's someone in the chat right now complaining that we're not holding Matt Nagy's feet to the fire about his offensive game plan a little bit more, and that's just completely wrong. I mean, I think Hub. I mean, this is the most critical I think that I've ever heard you all week. Whether it was Ad House asking questions pointedly to Matt Nagy on the radio, in your columns, I definitely think that you are up. Maybe upset's not the wrong word, but you are definitely questioning it. But getting back to what you said, they have to. There's several things to me. They have to get more vertical, obviously, and doing it early would be smart. David Montgomery has to be involved better in the first quarter than he was. And the other thing is the middle. So when we do this podcast, I always pull up the depth chart for the opposing team just so I can refresh it. There's just a bunch of guys on the Cincinnati Bengals defense. There is no one that scares you. Particularly over the middle of the field. I think that's an area that the Bears can really take advantage of. Cole Kmet should be open there. But the thing is, and Sean wrote this in his Bear Down Nerd Up column this week, was Jimmy Graham was on the field for 19 snaps? Is that what it was?
13.
It was less than that.
Yeah, 13
snaps. Yeah.
I mean, it was $7.5 million to keep Jimmy Graham around because you wanted to have a veteran tight end, 2 tight end sets. He needs to be on the field this week. They need to be running those 2 tight end sets, and they need to be taking advantage of the middle of the field against the Bengals.
Well, and here's the irony of what you just said, Kyle. I feel strongly that Jimmy Graham should be here. I don't think that was a mistake. The way he was used Sunday night was clearly a mistake. But here's the weirdest part of all. If you're going to do what they did Sunday night, which is throw everything within 10, 12 yards of the scrimmage, wouldn't you rather have 2 tight ends and your big red zone guy as one of them instead of 3 wide receivers? What is the point of having Demir Byrd get 10 more snaps than Marquise Goodwin and both of them taking snaps away from Jimmy Graham if you're not going to try and throw anything more? So that the whole thing was just kind of bizarre. And that's where, we got to see what – and also I just want to add, I don't think my question asking has changed at all. But yes, I mean, they've been critical this week because there's things to be critical of, and that's our job, and that's the way it's supposed to go. And I think when you do that, when you're critical when you should be and complimentary when you should be, it makes it a lot easier to get the best information that you can. So, but for those of you who are listening and not reading, Kyle is correct. We have been unhappy this week, as you all have as well. So make sure that you join us, we hope 24/7 at shawlocal.com, as well as for our podcast each week. Do we do predictions on this podcast? Because we got to go. I can't remember. I think we predicted the game last week, didn't we?
Yeah, we predicted it.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Well, it's in print anyway, so we might as well do it. Sean, go ahead.
I believe I had the Bears 24-20.
Okay, and any one-liners you want to throw in with that?
Just what I said earlier. I think the Bears win in the trenches, and I think the pass rush is a little bit more noticeable this week.
Kyle?
I have the Bears winning 27-24. Which actually giving up 24 points to me for this defense against the Bengals is kind of discouraging. The Bengals gave up 5 sacks last week. This is not a very good offensive line. They needed to invest more in it. If the Bears can't get home against this offensive line, that's going to be a major concern.
Well, guys, we're all on the same page. Not everybody at Shaw, though. We had several of our other experts taking the Bengals. My good buddy Dan Hampton on our Pro Football Weekly TV show has taken the Bengals, and you know who Hamp is. He's a Bears Hall of Famer. Guys, I just think people constantly overreact to week 1. I mean, when was the last time we saw 9 underdogs win outright, 5 of them on the road? Does that mean that that's who all those teams are? Are the Green Bay Packers not going to score a touchdown all year and get beat 38-3? I mean, you can't put too much into what happened last Sunday. The Bears are a more talented football team than the Cincinnati Bengals. I love some of the Bengals' young players. Jamar Chase, as you guys know, was absolutely my first wideout in the draft. You saw what he did last week. But at the end of the day, The Bears are the more talented team. They're playing in their home opener. The Bengals are coming off a huge high, winning an upset in their home opener. Now they're going into the Bears' den, so to speak. It just common sense. I expect the Bears to win the game. I'm not saying it'll be pretty. I do think we're going to see more of the Matt Nagy offense. And I had this one 30-20, and I'll go with you. I don't want to see the defense giving up 20 points, but let's not underrate the Bengals. I mean, Burrow's the real deal. Chase is the real deal. Joe Mixon's leading the NFL in rushing coming into week 2. The real question here is, what does it tell us about the Vikings? But we'll get to that in a couple of weeks. So there it is. We are all taking the Bears this week. We all really appreciate you guys being with us. We also want to thank our sponsor, Heinz Lumber. And unless you hear differently, we're going to be back here again at 9:30 next Friday morning. So catch us on Twitter. You can join us. We'll look forward to your questions. Hopefully we'll be talking about a 1-1 football team. And everybody enjoy the game this weekend.